Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Tallman, and with me once again today are Rosie Calvert with our brokerage and Kelsay Bolden, who serves as our Director of Resident Relations. Welcome back to the show, you two.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so we're going to continue a tradition. It used to be like an annual tradition. We've made it more like a quarterly thing now. But for this installment, we're going to kind of set the sun on 2025, talk about how the year went for us from a leasing and a brokerage perspective. So we're going to review a lot of numbers and just things you all see in the individual departments that you both manage for 2025. And then we're going to, as we always do some predictions for what we think 2026 might look like. And you two are so qualified to do this because you live and breathe it every day. So I'm really happy to have you on. And so, Kelsay, let's just get right into it. As head of our leasing, what stood out to you most when you think back on 2025?
Yeah, it was hard to narrow it down. I think that the thing that stood out the most to me was our renewal numbers. That was so outstanding this year. I mean, we had months where we exceeded an 80% renewal ratio. Mm-hmm. So that was my number one thing that stood out this past year.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons for that. In fact, I was talking to Tim.
Yeah.
He does all of our renewals. He's responsible for all that in our company. I may have him on the podcast soon because I want to kind of dig in and talk about that process of renewals because, look, there are market factors why renewals are so good right now. I think a lot of companies are experiencing very high renewal rates. But Tim has taken huge ownership in renewals, and I think it's paid some dividends for our clients. So, Rosie, as you're where you sit as a manager of our brokerage, what stood out to you most in the housing market in 2025?
I feel like the housing market, from my perspective, was more defined by shifting of who's holding kind of all the cards, from sellers to buyers. We saw a rebound on inventory a little bit and an emergence of what I would dub, or what they're calling, a refuge market, where it's meaning like our metropolitan area is a lot more effective and attracts a lot more home buyers when you're thinking about pricing versus like coastal. So we're seeing a lot of traffic and activity of buyers entering our market versus years before where you were just seeing more of local. So I think that also resonated in 2025. We did see a lot of growth over this year for listings, more than year over year based, on past statistics. We're seeing about 12% more activity in our market than we had before. But the biggest takeaway is we're, ending the year on this mark where it's a mismatch, if you will, between a buyer's budget and what a seller's expectation is. And it led to a lot of record numbers towards like canceled contracts, people pulling their properties from the market. The sellers who have higher equity in their homes were tending to pull their homes from the market here at the end of the year. Rather than lowering prices. Now, some did lower prices, but we saw a lot more exiting and a lot less listing. That's interesting. Yeah.
So just on that, so you had people that had lots of equity that went on the market, and they're like, well, if I have to reduce that much, I'm just going to keep it as a rental property. Is that
correct? Yes.
Interesting.
Because the numbers didn't pencil out for the investor that's out there buying right now.
Yeah.
So, they're thinking of interest rates, they're thinking about turnover, they're thinking about all those factors. And what may have penciled out for them prior to the 2020 market change doesn't pencil out for them today. So most people are recognizing when they put their property on the market, they're not going to find the numbers being anywhere near what they want to cash out for. So they did delist. There's also the home buyer that's seeking things that are different. They're not looking for the acreage. They're not looking for, the mansion quality. They're not looking for all the pretties, if you will. They're looking for more like everyday comforts. So they're willing to condense step back from some of these must-haves that they were going to have to take on, or wanted to take on rather. They're looking for more things like, can I have a home office? There's still a lot of people working from home. They aren't planning to build further onto a home. They're looking more about the creature comforts and the convenience of having flexible spaces in the home versus what we've seen in the years past.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of things happening where people are moving in together. We're seeing a lot more multi-generational homes from this year as well. So grandma and grandpa are buying or selling their properties and moving in with family members. We're starting to see that, and I think that's going to trend more in 2026 as well. And we did see a lot more cash offers. So overall, the standout to me is the shift. It went from being a seller can kind of set all the rules. Buyers are now taking more control and being able to set those parameters for sellers.
Yeah, I think that's true. It is interesting. I think depending on who you talk to, Indianapolis has shifted into a buyer's market.
Mm-hmm.
Now that may not translate to investment products because there's
True.
a lot more competition for those.
True, especially
But generally-
multifamily.
Yeah, generally speaking, I think if you're looking for a owner-occupied home, today's a really good time to buy
Mhm.
one because interest rates there were three reductions from the Fed this year, right? So
Yeah.
not bad really. And it kind of leads us into our next topic. I kind of want to spend a minute on recapping the 2025 predictions because last year at this time, Kelsay, you and I did this podcast together. I honestly didn't remember it was just us two, but I went back and watched it and I always do that every year and get the predictions. I was like, okay. So Rosie must have been out. I don't know why Rosie wasn't a part of this last year, but so I was responsible for making the housing predictions and Kelsay, you did the leasing. So let me kind of take people back to basically this time last year where I had a couple of different predictions, one around interest rates and one around home prices. So last year, interest rates were in the high sixes when we did this podcast last year. And I predicted, and maybe actually they were around 7. I don't remember exactly, but I predicted they would be in the upper sixes. They would, my notes here, they would stay in the upper sixes. They must have been in the upper sixes at the time last year. And I don't think I hit that. I think you could safely say I missed it. Those 3 interest rate cuts I meant helped. I know it's not completely tied, but there is some relationship there. But right now, I looked it up yesterday. The average 30-year fixed is 6.22%. Now, an investor probably is not going to get that, but that's what, if you want to go out and get a 30-year mortgage, you're going to pay. So I missed that. Interest rates are lower than I thought they would be this time last year. And then home prices, I said I think they were going to be fairly steady, which I know may be a cop-out, but I just really felt like there was nothing major that was going to move prices either way, particularly based on my thoughts about interest rates. But turns out I was right, but very much on the low end. I said between 2 and 5%. If you look at, we just got some numbers from MIBOR. If you look at single family homes in Marion County, they were up 2% year over year. So pretty steady to maybe a little anemic, like not great movement there, particularly if you look at it from the last, like Rosie mentioned, from 2020 on, where prices really surged up. So about 2%. So Kelsay, let's talk about your leasing predictions. I'm going to tell you what the prediction was. You tell me what happened. I don't know. I'm going to wait to hear what you say. But
Okay.
you said as far as rent prices go, that they would be stable and may dip in certain areas. What did we see from leasing in 2025 from the pricing standpoint?
Well, we saw them dip in all areas. So, they didn't dip substantially, but I do think that we were prepared for this outcome of 2025. So we started to see the trend in 2024 of lowering rent prices. That's why we made that prediction that they'll be stable or slightly lower. I don't think that we anticipated as many price drops as we did do in 2025, but we did start to relay that messaging to our clients in 2024 that, hey, this is what we're seeing. We need to be aggressive with our pricing to make sure that we're, matching the market. So I do think that we did a good job of predicting that. Overall, we saw that things were slow. We didn't quite see the boom in our summer months that we're used to seeing in previous years. So I feel that leasing this year was just very steady overall. We still signed several leases per week, but in those summer months, we see great numbers. This year, we just saw a little bit lower. So I think that was a shock for us. No, I don't want to say shock, but it was something different for us than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, Kelsay, I think 2 years ago, I thought it was the worst I'd ever seen. Last year seemed to be, normal seasonal pain. This year, having, made more effort to get out in the community and really talk to other people and investors and other property managers in our area, I can say without doubt, and also not just networking here locally, but in the broader country of property managers and talking to them, I've probably heard more concern about leasing this year than I ever have. Do you feel that way? Or, I mean, you live it every day.
Yeah,
Okay.
I 100% agree with that. And we actually, we have something called the state of the market. We like to keep our clients informed on what we're seeing. And the last messaging we did, either this month, I think it was this past month, we reported national statistics of, price drops are everywhere. And it felt very painful this year compared to the previous years.
Yeah, I mean, just very anecdotally on my portfolio and Scott's portfolio, we have several vacant properties now and homes that I think are in great shape. Yeah. And I feel like they're really priced well, which are, we always say that's the two biggest levers that investors can pull. And they're not getting showings. And we've done, professional photos. We've done everything. And it just seems like things are really slow right now. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. I think renewals have to be a part of that, right? There's not nearly as many people moving.
Right.
The tenant base is smaller. And Rosie, I guess back to you real quick. So Kelsay, I guess to put a button on the prediction, I think you got that right. I'll say that, we did see some contraction in a lot of the areas that we manage and maybe specific homes that we managed. And again, on our portfolio, I don't want to go into too much detail, but yeah, we have had to ask less than we thought we would on some of our properties. But Rosie, I think listings for us, when I think about listings, I think about listings from our clients that, we have a move out. And they're like, hey, it's a good time for me to end the investing cycle. And we know that's just a natural part of any investing cycle where they sell it. That's affected that business, right? Because we're just they're not having nearly as many move outs. I mean, that's just the reality. So we don't have as many at bats, so to speak, of homes that we could, put into the brokerage system. I'm sure you felt that.
Oh yeah. I think even you're seeing it all around. I think a lot of investors did a big push in 2024 versus 2025. I think some people decided to sell in 2025 to capitalize on the proceeds they were going to get from the appreciation they saw from COVID. So, while there were less people really entering the market as a seller based on the information that I shared with them, yes, you might be getting lower rent. You might be concerned with that. But until we see things stay, level out and become corrected, which is what the market is doing right now, it may make more sense to hold off and take that lesser rent simply because your value, your equity is still there. And yes, it may hurt your cash flow a little bit, but while things are still working themselves out between buyers and sellers, that was my advice. So I did see a lot more people opting to re-rent and taking the longer days on market from the leasing standpoint than going to the market and selling for $30,000 less or maybe $20,000.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just, I haven't thought about it this way, but hearing both sides of this story, it's like investors are getting squeezed a bit. And we've talked about that and, as far as pricing and what it costs to turn properties and insurance and taxes and all this stuff that's in interest rates, that have been squeezing investors. But I would guess if the sales market was, very robust and we were selling homes like we were 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that Kelsay, the number of homes we have available for lease would be down because they'd been like, hey, it's not leasing. I don't want to keep on reducing. I'm going to Rosie. I'm selling it, and I'll sell it in 5 days and probably get multiple offers. So it's like they're kind of not stuck. I don't think you could ever be stuck with a property. I really don't feel that way, but it's like they don't have great options now because they're going to have to give up either the rent or more vacancy if they try to hit that price point, or take it to market and not get nearly as much as they want or expected to get because they're maybe still living in that, COVID area pricing and market where homes just sold themselves basically. So interesting stuff. All right, let's move on to 2026 predictions. And Rosie, I'm going to put you on the spot, and Kelsay, you as well. Let's talk about interest rates. Rosie, your prediction for 2026, what are you saying right now?
I think based on what I'm seeing in the market today and what I'm talking with fellow colleagues about and lenders and just seeing in my own personal deals, the forecasts point to a slow drift in interest rates going downward, but nothing dramatic. I don't think we're going to see anything dramatically drop. I don't think that they're going to be unpredictable. I think we're correcting our market. We're going to see predictable ranges. I really feel like that the 30-year fixed is still going to be somewhere between the 5.9 to the 6.4, depending on what they're qualified for. I think that's going to trend for 2026. I don't expect anything crazy to happen.
So you think we may get sub 6 on the average 30-year mortgage?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I think I think the Fed's being cautious. There's all kinds of different numbers coming out, and I think they're in a tough position. I think there's this pressure to keep lowering interest rates, and I just don't know that that's a great thing for the economy overall. I don't want to get too into the weeds with that, but I go back to what Josh Heinz, who's a national lender, he was on our podcast several months ago, and he's like, if we get into the 4s, there's going to be reasons we did that you won't like. No one will like the pain we'd have to go through to get into the 4s again. Yeah. And I agree with that. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. How about home prices? Rosie, what do you see with home prices?
I think that's going to follow that same trend. They're going to trend downward. They've already been trending downward if you have to sell. But I do think that there's a mixed debate going, but from where I'm sitting at, where the finishes are on the properties we sell for our investors, they are having to give a little bit more, whether it be concessions, higher days on market. If you have a tip top dollar that you're like, I'm holding out till I find that buyer, be prepared to give concessions and long days on market. But I think that we might see, if we get a little forgiveness and we get closer to that 5.9 for interest rates for buyers, I think we will see some appreciation there, about 4 to 6%, but it's not going to be anything astounding like we've seen after 2020. Our market's still healthy, so the 4 to 6% in our market, where the rest of the nation's probably hovering around 2%. So I think we'll see some good appreciation because we're that refuge market where we have a very affordable market. I think that you're going to see improved buyer power even with the rising prices. I just think that it's taking steps towards a healthier market, a more predictable market, people knowing what they're getting into. They're not going to have to do a bidding war. They're not going to have to expect to give up so much as a seller either. We'll see some new houses hitting the market as well, which will change things. People who maybe have had something that was unique. I think that we're going to step into a healthier market. I think that there's going to be different kind of housing entering the market that has those flexible spaces, that have more of the vinyl village design. Those always sell very easily. I think those are going to keep their value very well. But anything that has something unique to it is going to be a little bit tougher, but that's always been the case. I think that those who have that more traditional housing, the three beds, 2 baths, maybe with a loft area or a flex space, they're going to see a lot better pricing. And I think that they're going to qualify more. They're going to help with that median sales price for our area. I think that we will see a rise in the listings that hit the market, because I think by the time that the spring market gets here, I think people are going to be a lot more comfortable with how things are and what the market is trending as right now. So I don't think there's going to be as much competition. I don't think there's going to be as much inventory as what was pre-2020, I guess you could say. But I think there's going to be enough where you're not going to have to pledge your firstborn child to get a home.
Yeah.
If that makes
So
sense. It's not going to be a bidding war.
have you on record here? Prices down a little bit, you think? They're going to
I
continue to
think
go down?
depending on the product you're putting out there, yeah. You're not going to be able to just throw anything out there. So if you have turnkey, perfect condition, newer mechanicals, newer roof, your pricing will be higher than those in the other areas. It's really going to be the buyers that dictate some of that and what they're ready to do.
Okay, so we saw 2% again. I'm looking at single family, Marion County 2%. You think that's going to stay about the same, lower? So
I'm hoping somewhere between 4 and 6. That tends to be our trend. Last year we were in 5 to 6%. But again, if you had that property that had a 15-year-old roof or had some of those, dated finishes, you weren't seeing that at all.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before, maybe, but there's one thing to get a sale price. There's also what your net is, right? So for example, let's say 4 years ago, you could sell a house with a marginal roof, get your sale price, and not have to do with the roof. Well, today you might get your sale price, but you're going to pay that $10,000, $15,000 for the roof, which doesn't show up on the sale price, but it affects your net.
Correct.
So I think, there's no way of knowing that. Probably, I'm guessing there may be some data on that, like net is, have net proceeds changed over the years, but I'm sure they have. Just we know it is okay. So I'm sure that is changing where sellers are having to just do more work at this point.
It's not even work. It's even they're giving concessions to closing costs. They're giving $3,000 to $8,000 in closing costs just to get them to purchase. That's not even with inspection negotiations.
Yeah, a good example is Scott and I are selling a duplex that we've owned for a very long time. One side came empty, and we're going to try to, hit that house hacker market, or just someone who wants to buy it and rent both sides. We don't know, but we walked through the property and it was totally updated when we bought it many years ago. And so we're like, this kitchen just doesn't work anymore, and the bathroom needs updated. And so we're doing a bunch of work to just get the property kind of up to spec and more attractive for people, because we know we have to come on strong, right? And we're just kind of following the market trends there. So, okay, Kelsay, rents. Where do you see rents trending in 26?
Yeah, I think that maybe I'm being optimistic here, and maybe it's because I'm hoping for a better market. But here's what I feel like. Intuitively, I feel that rent prices are going to increase slightly. So we, at renewal time, we always tell our clients, we want to get you an increase, similar to the inflation rate. Do I think it's going to be 3 to 5% of an increase? No, but I do feel like we're going to see maybe 1 to 2% increase in rent prices. And the reason I think this is, one, from just myself and my social networks. A lot of my peers are moving out of their houses. They simply can't afford it anymore, and they're interested in rentals. They're not making those moves yet just because of everything that's been going on. There's been a lot of economic uncertainty this year. And so I think that we'll see a trend of people making those moves in 2026. I've also come across a couple of articles. I think one of them was in the Wall Street Journal, people who are qualified to buy, but they're choosing to rent. And I think they like that flexibility. So I think we're going to see a higher demand for rentals in 2026.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it a couple of times on this podcast, and I think Jared Shore first brought it up to me, but it is so much less expensive to rent today than buy in Indianapolis. It's
100% agree.
Yeah, it's more that way than I think it ever has been, at least as far as people have been tracking it. So, are we a renter state, a renter city, a renter nation? We're becoming more and more, because we all know the affordability problem with buying homes. So let's hope, Kelsay, right? I think,
yes.
I do think, again, people can be very content to stay where they are, which is great if you own a property and it's rented and your tenant continues to renew. It's not great when you have a vacancy, because you do suffer from some of that. So, all right, Kelsay, back to you. Talk about some of the things that we've done in 2025. It's been a challenging year from the leasing perspective, as you kind of went over, to increase exposure for our properties. We're constantly iterating here and, looking for new ways to market. Talk about some things that your team has been working on this year.
Yeah. One of the newest and most exciting things would be professional photography. We've started implementing that, and I think we've seen some success with that. The photos just look great,
Yeah.
So that's something we just started doing this recently. So our clients who have homes hitting the market next year will get that information more in the upcoming months. We have just really been digging in a lot this year because it's been challenging. So we're trying to think outside of the box on things that we can do. So we've amped up our social media marketing for the homes that we have, especially the ones that have been sitting. A lot of people are on social media and they're looking for homes. And so that's why we decided to use that as an opportunity to get some more exposure. We've been really trying to learn the ins and outs of our syndication. So like, how can we get your home more exposure on Zillow? And there's things that we try to do on a back end, like tricking algorithms. And I know that that probably sounds really bad, but I think that it's important that our clients know we're becoming experts in these things so we can help get their homes leased more quickly. Another thing that we're doing or we've done is we've looked at comps across, the city just to see what they're doing. So how can, we do it and do it better? We're looking into revamping our rental promotions. And we have a new software system to analyze a bigger picture of comps for when we put homes on market for leasing.
Yeah, I love it. I think there's a lot of things going on there that are exciting. And, you think professional photos, you think $300-400, but we've been able to, I think Rosie gave us the connect.
Yeah.
But get into a company that we're able to offer really, really affordable professional photos. Scott and I've been doing it, and they look phenomenal. Like they do. To me, you can tell they're professionally photographed, and they just make the listings much more appealing. There's data out there that, these do work. I was a little skeptical, to be honest. I'm like, hey, an iPhone does a great job. Let's, if people are more concerned about the price and location, but no, there is a lot of data out there that shows that homes with professional photos do get a lot more activity, which should translate into leases. So it's good stuff. Rosie, we'll end with you. Talk about your perception of Indianapolis as still, a good place to invest, and also, other areas where your team is seeing opportunities to get some things bought this year and next.
Oh, yeah. The biggest thing I get is when I do talk to these buyer leads that come through and talk to us about wanting to invest in Indianapolis, and we're getting quite a few just because we are such a great market. So when buyer leads are coming to us, sometimes they're stuck on cash flow, and I would say there's many more profit centers to focus on as well that we do educate and advise on, that we do highlight, we do take in consideration. With us being that refuge marketplace where you have more smaller, more affordable homes without the big prices that happen on the coastal cities, that is going to be very useful for our investors who are entering our market. It has a strong potential for a long-term investment and appreciation, as well as economic stability, and just makes us much more competitive than where you're seeing some of these other large metropolitan areas, such as Texas, California, the East Coast.
Yep.
So, again, I think the biggest thing that we have is our appreciation potential for our properties, because we are at that 4 to 6% margin potentially in 2026 versus the rest of the nation who's hanging out at that 2%. I think last year, most of my sellers saw 5 to 6%. And, during the time where the COVID price hikes that happened, but we still have that healthy appreciation coming through as our market stabilizes and becomes the new norm. I think we also have a lot of opportunities with the economics of our area and job growth. We have a lot of big companies in the area. It's diverse and more resilient just because we do have healthcare with like Eli Lilly and IU. We have technology with Salesforce. I've seen some bioengineering things coming to local areas just outside of the 465 loop, which Indianapolis is within. We see logistics with Amazon and FedEx, with, the distribution centers and FedEx. It's creating steady job creation. So like very steady. So that always is going to lead to population growth, right? And if people can rent cheaper than they can buy, it's a good time to be an investor here.
Yeah.
We're also very landlord friendly. So some of these things that you have to do in other major metropolitan areas, you don't have to do here. Some of it being the eviction process is a lot simpler here with laws that were passed, especially this year. And there's no statewide rent control that is that is happening in some other areas. It's just a lot safer of a risk. You're going to, investing is a risk, but we're a lot safer than some of the other markets that people are exploring.
Yeah.
With all those jobs and everything that's happening or scheduled to happen in 2026 and 2027, there's going to be the high demand for rentals, and therefore there's housing that is going to be needed. And if you're a first-time investor and you don't have a lot of money to spend, you're doing financing and you have 20 to 25% to put down, our entry point is a lot more affordable than other areas where you can find a property for $150,000 that's going to make sense for you to invest in long term. You can certainly find $300,000 properties that are going to have the same appreciation or better for you in the long run. Higher caliber property, higher caliber tenant. But those who are just wanting to take, just put the toe in the pool rather than jumping right in, you have that capability here, especially in areas that are maybe not technically Indianapolis proper, such as Kokomo, Indiana. Kokomo it's a very small community. They used to have a Chrysler plant, factory jobs that shut down, and it kind of hurt their area a little bit. But a company came in and has purchased that plant, as well as is building a second facility where they're going to be producing electrical vehicle batteries. So that's going to have a huge demand for jobs, which then leads to the housing that's going to be needed as well.
Yeah. So I'm still seeing traction in Kokomo. We're getting things bought up there, and it's a great spot to think about. Look, it's not a secret anymore. I think, we first started talking about Kokomo maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and we might have let the cat out of the bag a little bit because we're seeing a lot of people up there. So talk about besides Kokomo, talk about what other areas you seeing opportunity.
So a big one I have been seeing, and I kind of thought about this a few years ago, but I never really got anybody to go back behind me on it, but Whitestown and Lebanon. They have a lot of farmland, and they are developing that quite a bit, which is going to be leading to a lot of housing in that area as well. And it's going to basically, what everybody is saying, is going to rocket fuel the appreciation of those properties that are already existing. And I think we've seen a little bit of that. I've had some friends that I've known for years that have lived in that area, and they were thinking of moving, and they were like, I just can't believe the cost of some of the homes that are in the area now. So I think that is an area, Whitestown and Lebanon, look out for. If you're looking for something that's more urban, I would say we all know about Fountain Square, Bates Hendricks, near East Side, Fletcher Place. We're seeing some activity there. They offer appreciation just because there's a lot of development that's going on. A lot of people are the young, hip, trendy professionals are in that area. There's a lot of walkability. There's a lot of, cafes and bars and just any other things that young professionals really desire and just want to have within a walking distance. That's where you're seeing a lot of that. If you're looking for something that's a little more established, you can look in Broad Ripple and Meridian Kessler area. Going to be a little bit pricey, but that's where you see more people that are in between that young professional and maybe the family life. That's where they're headed to. So they have some good communities, good schools, close to Butler, IU. So you might have kids in college renting from you. And then you may also have a young family with a couple of kids in the toddler age that are in that area. So they also have a lot of walkability, a lot of things there as well. Some suburbs, the sleepy suburbs. I'm always a big fan of sleepy suburbs just because those tenants tend to stay for a while. You're going to see Westfield, Whitestown that I spoke about, Plainfield. I think you could see some things on the west side of Indianapolis growing more as well, just because there's a lot of baby boomer housing in that area, and those people are doing that multi-generational home move. So there's going to be a lot more available inventory for you to add value to, clean up, do higher finishes, call for a higher rent on. They have a great school system typically in those sleepy suburban areas. That's why you tend to see residents stay longer than maybe 1 or 2 years. So definitely check out those areas. And then if you're looking for something that has value add, maybe you're adding a fourth bedroom, converting a loft area to a bedroom, maybe doing some conversion in the basement, adding a bedroom area, I would look in Speedway and also the West Indianapolis because of the baby boomer housing. There's a lot of things that you can do with some of those homes that have great bones, and maybe the square footage isn't being utilized as best as it could be. So keep an eye on those areas as well.
It's a lot. It's a good recap. Thanks for doing that. So,
Of course.
well, ladies, this has been great. It's been kind of great looking back at the year. I know there's been challenges. You guys are both very like resilient and pushing through. So, but thank you all for coming on here and talking about 25 and giving us something to look forward to in 26. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We hope everyone has picked up some information that will help them in their investing. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another podcast. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Happy New Year, everyone. And please stay invested in your investment.